A little bit about Franklin County continuing the political revolution. We're a multi-issue organization that grew out of the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2015. The group has continued working on many of the issues Bernie raised in his campaigns and continues to raise, and those that have come since. We do much of our work through a series of task forces focused on particular issues or areas, but we operate with the understanding that those several areas are overlapping, interconnected, and interrelated. Our task forces include immigration, housing, education, single-payer insurance, climate, and reproductive justice. You can learn more about us at fccpr.us, information about the task forces, how to get our newsletter, to join FCCPR, and get involved in taking action. We're holding a series of webinars, action forums, and tonight is our first one in the series. And I can't think of a more timely or necessary topic than tonight's session on holding ICE accountable. Of the overwhelming number of issues that we're facing as a country and as a people, the attacks on us by our own administration with their hired thugs is near the top of the list. We've seen the videos and read the stories of their attacks in several cities. We know they're potentially heading our way, and we are right to be on edge, on guard, fearful of what their presence will mean for us, for our neighbors.
Oh dear.
But we are neither helpless nor powerless. And as we have seen most recently in Minnesota, we can stand up and fight back. The question is how best to do that, and tonight's speaker can help us know more about how to effectively hold ICE accountable for the harms they are doing and to stop this assault on us by our own people, funded by our own tax dollars. We're calling this evening session an action forum because our hope and intention is for you to learn more in order to take action, because it is clearly time for us to take action and to do so together. And John Bonifaz, a constitutional attorney who has been consistently acting for justice, is here to help us learn how we can most effectively do that. John Bonifaz is a constitutional attorney and the president of Free Speech for People, a national nonprofit legal advocacy organization dedicated to defending our democracy and our Constitution. Free Speech for People is leading a campaign calling on state and local prosecutors in multiple states across the country, including Massachusetts, to open criminal investigations into President Trump, Trump officials, and ICE agents for conspiring to unlawfully arrest, detain, assault, and terrorize residents, including U.S. citizens. He'll be specifically talking about prosecuting ICE agents for breaking state laws here in Massachusetts. Mr. Bonifaz will talk for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open up for questions and responses. When it's time for questions, we'll ask you to raise your virtual computer hand, and we'll let you know how to do that at the end of John's talk. So, with that, let's welcome John Bonifaz, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for that generous introduction. Thanks so much to you, Pixie, David, and everyone at Franklin County Continuing the Political Revolution for all that you do and for hosting this discussion. I'm pleased to be with all of you. Thank you all for showing up this evening for this discussion. So as Doug said, at Free Speech for People, we have launched a campaign to hold ICE agents as well as Trump and Trump officials accountable for the unlawful actions that they are engaged in multiple states. We have issued a series of detailed letters to the state and local prosecutors for California, Oregon, Illinois, Minnesota, Massachusetts, and Maryland, and soon letters to New York and New Jersey officials, all of which detail incidents in their states that rise to the level of needing criminal investigations and potential prosecution for state level crimes. In Massachusetts, which I know is a focus for this evening, our letter was delivered on December 11th to Attorney General Campbell. It followed a prior letter we issued to her in April of last year, in which we argued that the kidnapping of Mesa Ozturk, the Tufts PhD student who had been swept off the streets, disappeared, and sent 1,000 miles away to an ICE detention facility in Louisiana needed to be investigated for violation of state laws prohibiting kidnapping. But then we followed up with this more expansive letter in December, focusing on a number of other incidents that ICE has committed in Massachusetts, again, under the direction of Donald Trump, Kristi Noem, and other senior Trump officials. And I'm just going to read briefly some of those incidents we highlight in this letter, which is available, I should say, on our website at freespeechforpeople.org in the subsection Trump Accountability in the States, which you can get from the tabs at the top under Challenging Corruption. We document some of these incidents. I want to be clear that this is by no means a comprehensive catalog of all these incidents. They are based on media reports that are already available, but there are many others, I'm sure, that are for the Attorney General and District Attorneys to investigate. On May 31st, 2025, federal agents took an 18-year-old into custody in Worcester County on his way to volleyball practice with no warrant or reason to detain him. They also detained several minors in the car with him with no warrant or reason. He was detained for 6 days in a facility with no access to showers or sufficient food. He was sometimes given only crackers for a meal. He also served informally as a translator to the men detained with him, who only spoke Portuguese or Spanish and were asked by federal agents to sign documents they did not understand. On June 4th, 2025, federal agents detained Alejandro Reyes in Essex County and allegedly brought him to a cemetery where they beat him before discovering he had a green card. Then they threatened to revoke the green card after discovering it. In September of 2025, mass ICE agents detained Hernan Escobar on his way to work by smashing his car window, forcibly trying to remove him from the car and pointing a taser at him, despite giving the agents his identification and pleading with them to wait for his wife. The agents who refused to identify themselves to Mr. Escobar hurt him badly enough that he needed to be taken away on a stretcher to a detention center where he is still being held. Mr. Escobar is married to a U.S. citizen and was in the process of obtaining legal status. On September 26, 2025, during a violent traffic stop, ICE detained several U.S. citizens and legal residents, including a 13-year-old boy with autism, while arresting an undocumented resident using excessive force while doing so. On October 9th, 2025, ICE agents arrested a 13-year-old boy, Arthur Berto, in Everett police custody and transferred him to Virginia a day later, evading a pending successful habeas petition that resulted in an order to have him released. That order was later rescinded on the grounds that it was issued after the minor was moved. Although DHS claimed publicly Berto was carrying a gun and a knife, Everett police asserted that he had no gun. Furthermore, Berto is still in custody nearly a month later, despite a requirement under the Flores settlement that he have a prompt bond hearing. On November 4th, 2025, ICE agents raided a Boston car wash and arrested 9 individuals, claiming they were all undocumented. However, the owner claims that at least some of the employees have some sort of legal status, but that most of the agents did not identify themselves and did not give the individuals, most of whom only speak limited English, an opportunity to obtain their papers from their lockers. And on October 20th, 2025, federal agents detained and deported a first-year college student without a warrant or any proof that she was subject to a final deportation order, and in defiance of a court order that she remain in Massachusetts while her case was pending. Now, I should add that since sending this letter on December 11th to the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, as well as several district attorneys in Massachusetts who have jurisdiction over these matters, we have learned through additional media accounts and a review of federal court records, more information about the incident involving Alejandro Reyes. And we've since followed up with the Attorney General's office and the Essex County DA with this information. I'll share that with you now. Mr. Reyes, a long-time lawful U.S. resident and green card holder, has publicly reported that ICE agents pulled him from a construction van and took him to a cemetery where they, quote, beat him several times in a dark area. There's video of footage of the agents pulling Mr. Reyes from the van and violently forcing him to the ground. There's also media accounts describing Mr. Reyes' account and stating that he, quote, showed signs of wounds all over his body that he suffered in that ordeal. In addition, according to an order issued by a U.S. magistrate judge, which is overseeing the return of his property at this point that was taken from him, it appears that federal agents have admitted to taking Mr. Reyes to the cemetery and turning off their body cameras, which had been on during the arrest, while at the cemetery. All of these incidents, in our view, rise to the level of requiring criminal investigations by the Attorney General and by the district attorneys covering these jurisdictions. They have a duty, a sworn duty, to enforce state criminal laws against any perpetrators of violence and of violations of these criminal laws. Now, I'm sure you have heard or will hear, if you call the Attorney General's office or if you speak to others about this, the question of immunity. The Supremacy Clause of the Constitution provides immunity for federal agents to conduct themselves doing lawful duties around the country. But it does not provide immunity for federal agents to engage in unlawful actions. J.D. Vance has stated publicly that Jonathan Ross, who murdered Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis, Minnesota, earlier this month, has absolute immunity. This is a complete fabrication of the law. It is a lie. There is no such thing under the law as absolute immunity. And neither Jonathan Ross nor any ICE agent has immunity to commit murder. Neither of them have immunity to engage in kidnapping, to engage in assault and battery, to engage in illegal detention. These are all state-level crimes for which state and local prosecutors in Massachusetts, Minnesota, Illinois, and these other states, all of them need to be enforcing state criminal laws against these ICE agents and those who are directing them, including Donald Trump, for these unlawful actions. Now, you may also hear, with respect to Donald Trump, the claim, well, he has absolute immunity because the Supreme Court gave him that. In Trump v. United States, which is the case that proceeded after Special Counsel Jack Smith had indicted Donald Trump for his role in the insurrection on January 6, 2021, and trying to overturn the 2020 election. In that case that reached the Supreme Court said that presidents have immunity for official acts. It is a disaster of a ruling. We condemned it at the time. We support efforts to overturn it through a constitutional amendment. But it's important to remember that then Special Counsel Jack Smith went back to the federal district court for the very case that was before the Supreme Court, and he made clear to the district court that he would demonstrate that none of the facts in the underlying indictment constituted official acts. He was not able, of course, to demonstrate that because time ran out. Donald Trump reclaimed power and Jack Smith resigned and the cases were dismissed. But the fact is here that there are no official acts with respect to the crimes that we've alleged in these letters. Murder is not an official act. Conspiracy to commit murder is not an official act. Assault and battery cannot be defined as an official act. Neither can kidnapping, neither can illegal detentions. So Donald Trump as well must be the subject of these criminal investigations, as should Kristi Noem, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, and other senior officials in the Trump administration, along with the ICE agents who are directly involved in these unlawful actions. We are urging people all over Massachusetts and elsewhere to join us in this campaign. If you live in Massachusetts, we hope you will join us in calling on Attorney General Campbell to open this criminal investigation and, where appropriate, where the facts lead her, to engage in prosecuting these individuals involved in these crimes. And we urge you as well to help amplify this message, to write letters to the editor, to send emails to your networks. If you're part of an organization, to send it to your organizational list, to amplify this on social media, and to sign a petition that we have, all of which is in a toolkit we're sharing with you tonight. And we urge you to forward that toolkit to others. We need to build the pressure on Attorney General Campbell and on district attorneys in this state to do their job, to enforce state criminal laws, to protect the public, and to ensure accountability for any crimes that ICE agents and their superiors are engaged in. And I'll just close with this. Jack Smith, as you may know, today went before the House Judiciary Committee for the first time, public testimony on the cases that he had brought against Donald Trump. And he said during that testimony that the rule of law is not self-executing. It is not self-executing. He's absolutely right. It requires all of us collectively to apply it. We have a collective voice here. We have collective power, and we must use it. We must raise our voices for our neighbors and for ourselves in ensuring that state criminal laws be enforced at this critical time. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions and comments about this.
Thank you very much, John. It is time for questions and responses now. We're asking that those with questions raise your virtual hand. For those of us who have been way too often on Zoom, you probably know how to do that. In case you haven't, the way you raise your virtual hand is you go to the bottom of the Zoom screen and you'll see a whole list of options at the bottom, and one of those says React. If you click on that, you will see a button that says then Raise Hand, and you click on that and we will see your hand raised and call on you in the order that you have done that. So with that, I hope we can see the screen. Right now I can't, so to call on people, but.
You want me to go ahead, Doug?
Okay,
I can
I'll
see.
call on people.
Go ahead, David.
Okay, good.
Don Ogden?
Yes, thank you. John, how is it Attorney General Campbell hasn't acted already?
Well, it's a good question, Don. I don't really know what the answer she would give as to why she's not acted already. I will say that one response we've heard from various different officials is the notion that they're already doing this. And we have to be very careful with that response. It is true that Attorney General Campbell and other attorneys general in the country have filed civil suits in court challenging unconstitutional executive orders that Donald Trump has issued and other such actions. And most recently, officials in Minnesota and Illinois have filed civil suits to try to block ICE from continuing to operate in their states. Those are important cases, and we are appreciative that Attorney General Campbell has been involved in many of those cases. But this is very different than what we're talking about here. The enforcement of state criminal laws is an entirely other area of responsibility that the Attorney General has, and she needs to exercise that duty as well. Now, I understand that people will say, and perhaps even in her office will say, well, this is a very difficult kind of case to bring, or set of cases to bring. The other side, the federal agents, they'll argue they have immunity. It could get removed to federal court. These will be very difficult cases to bring. We don't doubt for a minute that there will be efforts to claim immunity. But as I have said at the outset here, there is no immunity to engage in kidnapping, to engage in assault and battery, to beat somebody up in a cemetery. There's no immunity for any of this. And they will have very strong arguments to counter those claims of immunity that federal agents might make, whether or not the case proceeds in a state court or before a federal judge. So I think we really have to press the Attorney General to act here and not allow the response being, I'm already doing this, because that we know is not true.
Okay, thank you, Janet.
Hi, John. Thank you. Thank you for this. And thank you from the bottom of my frustrated activist heart for having something so important and cogent to focus on. My question is, I heard on the radio again today that if there are state criminal laws pressed in Minnesota, they would immediately, if I heard this correctly, go to federal court. How is that contained so that it doesn't get lost in the federal labyrinth of where we know where that would go?
Well, Janet, thank you for the question. It is very possible that this kind of case could be removed to a federal court. That is the prerogative that a federal agent has to invoke. And what I would say to that is, there are cases that these AGs are bringing in federal court. It's not like they're not, bringing matters before federal judges. Yes, it's true that there are major obstacles right now in the federal judiciary, but there also are federal judges who have issued very important rulings with respect to Trump's actions with respect to ICE in particular. So I don't think that the fact it gets removed to federal court ends the story whatsoever. The case can be brought in state court. If it's removed to federal court, it then can proceed in federal court before that federal judge applying state criminal laws. And that's not a reason not to bring the case. It's simply an understanding of how it could proceed.
Thank you.
Okay, Molly.
Hi, thank you. Thanks so much, John. Has there been any movement with any state attorney generals acting on this, prosecuting?
Not yet. There have been reports that we've seen of the Oregon Attorney General's office investigating the recent shooting that occurred in Portland of an immigrant couple in their car. That came right after the murder of Renee Good, and the Attorney General rightly immediately announced that he would be investigating that. So we're glad to hear that. We also have met with some district attorneys to date, not yet with any attorneys general, but it's a mixed response, and I think it does require more public pressure. I would just add that District Attorney Larry Krasner of Philadelphia County is the gold standard here. After Renee Good was murdered, he made a public statement at a press conference with the sheriff of Philadelphia County at his side, making clear that if ICE agents commit any crimes in his jurisdiction, he will prosecute them. We need more law enforcement officers to be saying the same thing. And the sheriff got to the microphone and backed him up on that. We need that statement being made by DAs and by AGs all over this country to make clear that if ICE agents commit crimes in their jurisdiction, they will prosecute them for that. So that's a bare minimum. Attorneys general of New York and Colorado have opened portals on their sites for receiving complaints. That's good. I'm glad they've done that. We need that as well, done by many other AGs and DAs for that matter, to make it easy for people to report, even if they have to do so anonymously. But that also is not enough, right? We don't just want to be collecting the evidence. We want there to be action. And the last thing I'll say on this that I probably should have said at the outset, it goes without saying most likely with everybody here, but we cannot rely on the Justice Department to enforce the law here. There are federal crimes as well associated with what ICE agents and Donald Trump and Kristi Noem are engaged in. And under normal circumstances, the federal Justice Department could be called upon to act as well. But we know that this Justice Department is simply now an arm of the White House, takes orders from Donald Trump, and cannot be relied upon in any way whatsoever. to enforce the rule of law. So that leaves state and local prosecutors as the only line of defense for enforcing criminal laws against these rogue actors.
Okay, thank you. Jamie?
Hi, and thank you for this. It's really wonderful. Just I have actually two questions. So definitely the state, and I hate to use this word, the state laws and these things trump the federal laws. Is
They don't
that
the
right?
federal laws. They're parallel to the federal laws. The federal laws don't always specify, like the state laws do these kinds of crimes. Some of them are more about conspiracy to commit civil rights violations, etc. But there are state laws that here need to be enforced that are parallel to the federal laws, not trumping them in any way.
Okay. That it would be a legitimate thing to try people in this state for these kinds of crimes. I mean, it wouldn't be something that the federal government could just say, "No, you can't do that."
Well, to be clear, if the federal government came in and said, we're going to prosecute these ICE agents, for example, Jonathan Ross, then there will
Right.
be a conversation that happens between the state prosecutors and the federal prosecutors as to who goes first. You could have two separate cases, two separate indictments, and there might be one case that goes first, and sometimes it might be the federal case. But here, we know the federal government is not going to engage, federal Justice Department is not going to engage in enforcing any federal laws, so it's left up to the states. And yes, it is not only legitimate, it's the responsibility of state and local prosecutors to enforce state criminal laws. If this was a violent mob, that was not attached to the federal government in any way whatsoever and was going around the country terrorizing people, effectively engaging in assault and battery, kidnapping, murder, we would obviously be expecting state and local prosecutors to stop that, to carry out enforcement actions against those in that violent mob. So why is it any different here? It shouldn't be at all, other than maybe the fear that state and local prosecutors have that these will be tough cases, or the fear that they're going to be targeted by Donald Trump and swept into some kind of court proceeding themselves. Maybe so, but they need to act without fear or favor. As Jack Smith so eloquently stated in his testimony, without fear or favor, they need to act as well in upholding their responsibility to enforce state criminal laws.
Okay, great. And just my other question would be, so when they say that Donald Trump has immunity for official acts, what does official mean? I
Well, that
mean,
has not been defined, right? The Supreme Court decision in Trump v. US that was then left open to further litigation on it, and Jack Smith was prepared to demonstrate that the underlying charges in his indictment did not amount to official acts. So each case is going to be case specific on this. And if, for example, the Minnesota AG and the local district attorney for Minneapolis decide to prosecute for the murder of Renee Good, and they prosecute Jonathan Ross, and if they were to name Donald Trump, then that case would define whether or not conspiracy to murder can be found to have immunity under an official act
yeah,
of the President of the
yeah.
United States. I don't think there's a plausible argument to be made that that should be defined as an official act, but that will be a case by case specific basis.
So that would kind of bounce off like the Constitution or something, right? Like
Well, again, the
what
courts are going
what
to have to decide how they
yeah,
interpret the Supreme Court's ruling in
yeah,
Trump v. US. But as of now, official acts, in our view, cannot be defined as including murder, assault and battery, kidnapping, and these
right.
other kinds of
Okay.
crimes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Wendy?
Yes. Hello. Uh, I wanted to follow up a little bit with the subject of the Philadelphia Attorney General's very strong statement. Is that something that is that a tactic maybe to use with Andrea Campbell, asking her, urging her to follow that same path that the Philadelphia people are taking. I mean, the more state attorneys generals that make these kinds of statements and follow through on them, the stronger everyone will be.
Yes, Wendy, thank you for that question. I do think that we can lift up what DA Krasner of Philadelphia has said and say to Attorney General Andrew Campbell that she too should make that statement. But I also want to be clear here that we have identified specific incidents in this letter that merit a criminal investigation. That this is not just about her making a statement like DA Krasner, but carrying out her duties to investigate these potential state level crimes and where appropriate to prosecute. We have not issued a letter yet to DA Krasner about unlawful actions by ICE in Philadelphia because we haven't yet found media reports documenting that. But we certainly will follow up with DA Krasner if in fact there is evidence of this. But I also do feel confident based on knowing about who DA Krasner is that he means what he says. He has demonstrated that in his track record as a DA. So I think if there are crimes that get committed by ICE agents in his jurisdiction, he will prosecute. But there already, in our view, are crimes that have been committed in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for which Attorney General Campbell must act. So a statement is honestly not enough at this point from Attorney General Campbell, but we can certainly start by highlighting to her what DA Krasner has said.
Okay, and also, thank you for that. I I heard that I can't remember who it was reversed the order that the judge put forth in Minnesota that to harass and tear gas and assault peaceful protesters. That was reversed, or it was frozen. That ruling was frozen, so that now ICE, in other words, they can do that. And
So,
how, like, if
yeah.
they rule against things in a state, how does it stand? I mean, how does it not get, overturned?
Yeah. So that case that you're citing
Yeah.
deals with a civil action, not a criminal action. A civil action was brought by individuals, and I believe the ACLU and others, that seeks to have that order issued. And they allege constitutional violations, right? These are civil cases based on constitutional arguments, and they are very important cases to be brought. I appreciate the fact that there are efforts to bring those cases. That is distinct. That is distinct from enforcement of state criminal laws. So the fact that a federal judge has ordered ICE to stop engaging in these actions based on constitutional standards, and that order may have been stayed by a higher level court, doesn't take away in any way that there are state criminal laws on the books in Minnesota and Massachusetts and elsewhere that must be followed. And we're talking here about the law enforcement officers, not private parties bringing civil actions, but law enforcement officers bringing state criminal actions where they find that there are crimes that have been committed. It's a very different thing than a civil case.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for coming and say hello to your daughter, Marisol, who's one of our wonderful allies, even though she's off of college now. I'm wondering about our DA, and I'm wondering, I wanted to look at the letter you had written to see if there were any of these crimes committed in the Northwestern District that that Dave Sullivan covers. Because obviously, if there haven't been, we don't have documentation for our region, then we can't, lean on him. But if there have been, we could, and I'd be happy to help. So what's the situation for the Northwestern District?
So thank you, Sharon, for that comment and for your hi to our daughter, Marisol. We're very proud of.
Oh, yeah.
So DA Sullivan is someone who I think needs to be approached as well on this. And I know him. I think he's a great person, but he also needs to be pressed to do
Mhm.
what DA Krasner has done. There are not any incidents in our letter of December 11th that are
Mhm.
in his jurisdiction. That does not mean, however, that he doesn't have a role to play here. He can do what DA Krasner did. He can hold a press conference. He can bring all the local police chiefs from his jurisdiction to his side, and he can make clear that if ICE engages in committing any crimes in his jurisdiction, he will, like DA Krasner says, he will prosecute those crimes. And people who've committed those crimes. And he can also do what the state attorney general and of Colorado has done, and the state attorney general of New York has done. He can say, I want to make this very easy for people to report to me. I'm not going to just rely on media reports, and I'm not going to just, wait around for people to come to me. If you have seen something that you think is a crime, or if you yourself
Mhm.
are a victim of a crime from an ICE agent, here's a portal that I'm putting on my website where you can easily report it. And I want to hear from you if you've seen that or you experienced it yourself. He can do all of those things, and we should urge him to act in this way. We should also urge him to call on the Attorney General to act as well, to open the criminal investigation, even for matters outside his jurisdiction. He has a voice here and he should use it.
So just to follow up real quick, I saw a report from the Immigration Rights Task Force that Pixie is here, that she had written up that there had been a meeting of immigrant rights support people with the district attorney, and he had said, oh, well, I'll put you in touch with the AG. So I'm thinking probably what you're talking about is very focused ask. Make a public statement and put a portal up so that people couldn't report. And because I know things have happened in his district that really nobody knows about, but have happened. So that's a two-piece ask.
Yes,
Easy enough.
very
Yeah, thank
basic
you.
and very much within his power to do.
Yeah, great. Thank you, John.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Amy?
Hi, yes, I'm just wondering like what you envision as the best case scenario. Like people are talking about if a federal judge were to take over that, I mean, I don't know, is it possible it would end up with the Supreme Court? Because, the judge might, rule that there was a criminal violation, but then it would be appealed somehow. Would that be an appeal through the Trump administration? And then wouldn't the Supreme Court just find a way to, like they've always done, rule in favor of Trump? I mean, would the actual ICE official, what's the best case scenario? What do you envision, like in the most optimistic, thing? Would the ICE official themselves be tried and actually, potentially convicted as individuals, or would it be some larger thing? With the people responsible like Kristi Noem, Trump, et cetera.
So the best case scenario is that state AGs and district attorneys all over the country abide by their sworn duty, open these criminal investigations into ICE agents in their jurisdictions, and prosecute where appropriate, where they have the evidence, these cases. So that we're not just dealing with one case, but we're dealing with multiple cases all over the country. That's point one. We're not interested in just seeing one case, right? There are multiple incidents, times 100-fold, all over the country. And many of us are seeing it on the videos. We see it in plain sight with respect to this assault and battery, these kidnappings, and now the murder of Renee Good. And of course, she's not the only person who has died in ICE custody, or at least at the hands of ICE. So then you get to the question, well, what can happen with these cases? What's the ideal scenario? The ideal scenario is that Donald Trump, Kristi Noem, senior Trump officials, and the ICE agents themselves involved in these incidents are all indicted if the evidence leads to that and are prosecuted for this. Now, the Department of Justice has a policy that says the federal Justice Department may not prosecute a sitting president. And maybe, in fact, the Supreme Court will put a stay on the prosecution by a state level prosecutor of a sitting president. But the case can certainly proceed, even with that, if there were to be a pending indictment of Donald Trump until after he left office, the case can still proceed with respect to the other individuals. There's no basis to say that those individuals can't be prosecuted during the Trump administration. And then to your question of, well, what happens? Federal judge oversees it. The federal judge hears the evidence. First, there's the question of immunity. And as I said, I think it's a very strong argument. There is no immunity for these actions. So the judge then finds there's no immunity. We're going to proceed to hear the evidence. We're going to have a trial. At the end of that trial, there's a jury that hears the evidence and perhaps then, based on that evidence, convicts. And then during the course of this case, there's an appeal that's happening over the immunity question. So the trial takes a backseat until you have that immunity matter litigated, and it goes through the federal appellate court and to the Supreme Court. And yes, there are Trump appointees in the federal judiciary now who are lockstep with Donald Trump. I totally accept that and agree. But that does not mean we do not try here. And that does not mean we do not litigate where the facts lead us. There are judges, including Trump judges, I should say, who have issued important rulings setting barriers to Donald Trump. I don't think, for example, he's going to win this case where he's trying to fire Lisa Cook, governor of the Federal Reserve. I don't think he's going to survive there in that case. He may not win his tariffs case. We'll have to see. So, it is an absolute reality that the Supreme Court is abysmal when it comes to standing up for the rule of law by and large. But there are opportunities here to enforce the law at the district court and appellate court level, and perhaps even at the Supreme Court where the evidence leads it to that. But I think the bottom line point is here is if we do not have our state and local prosecutors enforcing state criminal laws, then we're effectively saying there is no barrier, nothing whatsoever that prevents these individuals, these ICE agents acting as a secret police for Donald Trump from engaging in terrorizing our communities all over the country. And that cannot stand. We cannot allow that to stand without putting up an effort through our state and local prosecutors to stand up and force the rule of law against them.
Thank you.
Okay, Sarah?
Yes, hi, thank you, and thank you, John, and thank you everyone here tonight. So that letter you mentioned, you said in the beginning, December 11th letter, did Attorney General Campbell respond?
Not yet. No, she's not yet responded to it.
So kind of my question leads me to a question, if whether it's Attorney General Campbell or someone who works with Attorney General Carroll or works with Maura Healey or Carla Healey, and they say, well, you have to comply with what ICE says. We have to we can't do anything, or whatever they say, which is, you said, nonsense and also horrible. But for people who push back and say, well, there's nothing we can do, we don't want any problems, whatever, what would you say to them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, in terms of, we have to comply. There is no requirement for state and local prosecutors to comply with ICE. They don't take directions from ICE. They don't take directions from Donald Trump or Kristi Noem. They have their own jurisdictions and their own authorities and their own sworn duty to enforce state criminal laws. In fact, neither Donald Trump nor Kristi Noem nor ICE agents have any involvement in enforcing state criminal laws. Only state and local prosecutors do that along with their police forces in those jurisdictions. The argument that some might make, well, this will put a target on Massachusetts. And so we don't want to do this because then ICE agents will come even more so to our state. I think that's a terrible response. The notion that somehow we're not going to enforce state criminal laws, we're going to let this terrorizing of our residents continue out of the fear that it could increase. We have to recognize that ICE agents are going to continue this set of actions in Massachusetts and elsewhere, and there may even well be a surge coming here in Massachusetts, regardless of what state and local prosecutors do. So it would be very foolish, in my view, for state and local prosecutors to step to the sidelines, not enforce state criminal laws on the theory that by staying quiet, by effectively not doing their duties, that ICE won't come to our communities. They're already here, they're already engaged in committing these offenses, and they need to be held accountable.
Okay, thank you. One last question is, do you have any idea how, if any of these ICE agents are even vetted? I mean, do they just hire somebody because here you go, here's $50,000, come join us and kill people? I mean,
that's a very important question. I would encourage you all to go to a recent Democracy Now! Segment. I don't know the name of the individual right now, but Amy Goodman interviewed her just a week or so ago. She's a freelance journalist, and she went effectively undercover to apply to join ICE as an ICE agent. And she writes about this and what was involved, and she demonstrates there was absolutely no vetting whatsoever with respect to her. And I think that demonstrates how scary this situation is. And I know that Congressman Jamie Raskin and others in Congress have written to the Trump administration asking for proof whether or not any January 6 insurrectionists who have since been pardoned have now been recruited by ICE to be ICE agents. That's an important question as well. But I think that the likelihood here is that they're not engaging in any serious vetting, and they're allowing anyone who wants to carry a gun and terrorize people to show up and do it.
Thank you.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah, hey, good evening, folks. Thanks, John. And John, we've talked about a strategy of mobilizing town councils to push the agenda that you're talking about here. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Yes, thank you, Jeff. So that is another whole strategy here that's important for us to engage in, and that is to have our local towns, our local cities pass resolutions calling on the state attorney general and DAs to open these criminal investigations. And in Amherst, Massachusetts, where I live and where Jeff lives, our town councilor, Jill Breivik, has committed to champion such a resolution. And we expect that will soon be introduced before the Amherst Town Council. And it will be an important opportunity for the town of Amherst to speak through the town council to the attorney general and to other DAs and make clear that there needs to be criminal investigations in these matters. And we hope that it will pass, and that as it passes, it will inspire other communities in the state to pass similar resolutions. So it's another important vehicle. And Jeff, I know, is very willing to hear from people, and appreciate you, Jeff, for being willing to help organize this effort in Amherst. But if you live in Amherst, please reach out to Jeff Cannon.
Yeah, if there are folks here who do live in Amherst, I'll put my email in the chat, and please get in touch if you want to support this effort.
Okay, Pat.
Hi, this is Richard, Pat's husband, using her her Zoom link. Thanks, John. It seems to me that, and this is extremely important, I don't want to undercut the message that you're providing here, but it's after an illegal act has occurred, right? And in other words, the focus is on prosecuting individuals who violate the law. And as you know, that's a somewhat lengthy process. The hope is that that will eventually lead to deterrence so that it won't happen again in the future. But I'd like to ask a question about a different strategy and get your perspective on that. And this is something that Asha Rangappa, who's on the faculty at Yale Law School, made a couple of days ago. And that is that all of the authority that is granted to agencies in the federal government, law enforcement agencies like ICE and the FBI, Secret Service, are stipulated by statutes. That is what they can and cannot do. And so one way to prevent things from happening is to clarify the statutes. For example, on so-called unlimited immunity or other acts that they might, under current circumstances, be vaguely allowed to do, but which could, by changing the law, stipulate that they cannot do it. And as we saw in the Epstein files, a discharge petition can bring this to Congress relatively quickly. And that statute can be, simple majority in the House. Whether the Senate would go along is another question. So I wonder about the strategy of prevention rather than prosecution after the fact.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for that question. I want to be clear that this is not designed to be the only strategy that should be employed. I fully agree with you. There are other strategies that need to be employed. And for those who don't know, we have a whole campaign to press for impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump and senior Trump officials. We do think the impeachment power needs to be invoked again. And for those who are interested in that campaign, you can go to impeachtrumpagain.org and see our 26 grounds now for impeaching and removing Donald Trump from public office. As to the strategy you're highlighting, I agree fully with it. I think if there's energy to push members of Congress to do this, we should do that. We should also, frankly, call for the abolition of ICE and press members of Congress to introduce legislation like they did in 2018 to abolish ICE altogether. It is a rogue agency operating, as I said, as a secret police now for Donald Trump, and it needs to be abolished. We should similarly call for the end to immigration imprisonment. There's no basis for putting people behind bars because they don't have the papers to be in this country. That should not be the basis by which we carry out immigration measures. And now we know, of course, that the Trump administration is designing to build even more ICE detention facilities, put people behind bars. So we should call for Congress to take those kinds of actions and more. And we certainly support that effort. But we also have to recognize the Epstein files matter was an unusual situation where you had Republicans willing to join Democrats in getting it to be a discharge petition. And just with the impeachment process, we know the votes aren't there now to pass articles of impeachment, but we ought to invoke that effort, and we ought to certainly invoke the effort to say we're going to change the federal laws with respect to overseeing ICE. I do think state and local prosecutors have different constituents than the U.S. Congress, right? Some of them are overlapping, but some of them are clearly, in a different environment altogether. And I think that we have to press the case with them. The last thing I'll just say to your point about deterrence, you're right. A prosecution of an ICE agent, even of senior Trump officials, would take time. But the very process of opening criminal investigations where they are warranted throughout the country in multiple states would be a clear deterrence to certain ICE agents. Maybe not all of them, but some of them might think twice about the next time they think they're going to engage in assault and battery or kidnapping if they're now seeing their colleagues or even themselves under investigation for violating state criminal laws. So while it's true these cases will take time, the process of starting the investigations will be an important moment and needs to happen.
Thanks very much.
Okay, we have time for one or two more. Samuel?
Sam, you may be on mute.
You're muted, Samuel. Can you unmute?
Now I'm unmute.
Okay.
Sam Smith in Williamstown.
Hi, Sam.
Hi, John. What really gets into my bottom of my stomach is the fact that all of us almost seem I think we empathize with the AGs, maybe empathize and recognize that they have reasons to stand on the sidelines, not to open up criminal investigations. With the reason that you put forward, which I don't is true but weak, and that is that they just don't want to draw attention of the powers to Massachusetts. And there's so much of a sense that for example, multiple times, it's just one example of yesterday or the day before, a judge and his wife were both shot in Indiana, and they're fortunately they're going to recover from those wounds. But that kind of thing, is that kind of action and that kind of power in the federal government to cause us to hunker down, pull a blanket over our heads, and so forth. And I'm not trying to be critical of AGs, because maybe if I were in their shoes, I might be not standing on the rooftops drawing attention to the criminalities in Massachusetts, because it doesn't. Anyway, I made my point.
Yeah, no,
Where are we
yeah.
going to get this strength? When CEOs, when college presidents, when people of prominence don't seem to have moral fiber or moral strong backbones to act, why does it? What we do see is tonight a whole group of people in Franklin and Western Massachusetts who are at least deeply conscious of the failure, or that's maybe too strong, but the fact that people in power in the states are standing by. They're sitting.
Sam, excuse me, I'm going to have to stop you there because we're a little after 8 and you've made your point. John, if you
Yeah,
wanted to
no, I
respond to
appreciate
that, you
I
certainly
appreciate
can.
the point. I appreciate the point. It's a very important point, and I definitely want to address it. So first, where do we see the power coming from? Where how do we engage in getting those in positions of power to exercise their duties? I would say first and foremost, they ought to draw examples from ordinary people all over the country who are standing up, right? Including people on this call to come together in this discussion. But we can only, look at those in Minnesota right now, where there's literally a military occupation of the state, and Renee Good was just murdered, and yet people are still showing up. They're still blowing whistles. They're still filming ICE. They're still standing up for their neighbors. I mean, that should be in of itself the best example of why Attorney General Campbell and others should stand up as well. And tyranny only prevails on fear. That's the only basis by which it prevails. It does not have morality on its side. It does not have the popular will on its side. And it does not have the rule of law on its side. It only has fear. And so we have to confront that fear. We have to stand up to it. And we have to demand that our officials in this state carry out their duties. And honestly, if they're not prepared to carry out their duties because they're too scared, they need to step aside and let somebody else come in who does not have that fear. Without fear or favor, as Jack Smith has said, that is how we expect officials in positions of power to act who are supposed to enforce state criminal laws. And that's what we're asking. It's not a big ask, quite frankly. It's a basic ask to carry out your sworn duty to enforce state criminal laws against these rogue actors who are terrorizing our communities.
Yes.
Thank you, John. We're going to have to end the questions there. Apologies for those of you who are online, but it's after 8. I do want to ask John if you could say one more thing to all of us, which is what should we do when we go home tonight or get offline here with you? What actions would you like to see us take?
Yes. So the toolkit, as I referenced before, I believe it's in the chat. But if it's not, I also just want to highlight where you can find it on our website. So our website is freespeechforpeople.org. And at the top of the site, there are various tabs. The Challenging Corruption tab will take you to the section Trump Accountability in the States. And that page has all the letters that we've issued, including the ones to Massachusetts officials. And it also has a toolkit for Massachusetts residents to press State Attorney General Campbell and district attorneys to act. So we'd invite you to open that toolkit, take those actions that we're urging you to take, and join us together in demanding accountability for these unlawful actions. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight. And thank you, FCCPR, for hosting us.
Oh, our pleasure. And thank you so much for the work you're doing. I want to talk about two actions that we are going to take or can take locally. You referenced Minnesota, and of course, we know what's going on in Minnesota. Tomorrow, Minnesota is actually having a general strike. I think most or many of us are aware of that, which is urging people not to work, shop, or attend school. They have a march that's scheduled in Minneapolis at 2 p.m., which is 3 o'clock our time. We're asking as many folks as possible here to stand in support of and with them at 3 o'clock, which is Eastern time, same time as they're going out. Three possible locations for gathering would be the Greenfield Common, the Conway Street overpass, or the Good Trouble standout at the corner of Route 116 and Sugarloaf Street in South Deerfield from 3 to 4. So that's an action you can take. Bring your signs, dress warmly, and be a presence to stand with our neighbors in Minnesota. And then I want to let people know that we have a second action forum coming up very soon. In fact, next Tuesday at 7 p.m., Stephanie Luce will be with us. She's written Moving from Defense to Offense, Building a World for People and the Planet. So that's 7 o'clock. We will be sending out a notice about that to all of you who have registered here, and you can sign up to join us on Tuesday evening at 7. And that's really it for tonight. Please take care of yourselves and each other. And we need to act, and we need to act together. And this is a step towards that direction. So thank you. Take good care, and good night.